Thanks for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and it is my honor today to have two really notable people here. And as Israel begins to celebrate its 73rd anniversary of independence this evening, the Miami Jewish Festival kicks off throughout Florida virtually. One of the films being featured this year is called Upheaval, The Journey of Menachem Begin. And one of the local producers is an Aventura resident, local businessman and leader, Barry Gurland. And this film has gotten a lot of national recognition. And this morning, Barry is here along with the film's producer, Jonathan Gruber. Thank you for joining us, and it is my pleasure to be with you, you fine gentlemen. And I want to read a little bit, if I could, about Jonathan. All right. Sure. I found this where people would, but you're the executive producer of Black Eyed Productions, which has been directing and producing, writing, documentary films and videos for more than 20 years. He has made multiple award-winning feature documentaries that have been primarily featured in festivals, aired on U.S. public televisions, and broadcasts around the world. His shows have aired on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and many, many more. And the accolades go on and on. So you're really a prized possession for the people of the world. And I want to thank Barry for joining us. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about the film so people that haven't seen it are going to understand it a little bit better.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michael, for having us on. Barry, great to see you again virtually. The film is about former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and really the values that he embodies, which for me, what struck me was his leadership, in that he took responsibility for his actions. And really his story is a story of the state of Israel, both before it became a state and since its founding, as you said, 73 years ago this evening. And so he took responsibility for the things that he did, whether for good or for bad. He never enriched himself through his position. And I think that leaders today really could look to this model.
So, and Barry, why did you get involved in film? What motivated you so much, and what inspired you about learning more about Menachem Begin?
Well, I was fortunate enough in 1977 to be in Israel, and at that time, when Anwar Sadat from Egypt came and met with Menachem Begin. In fact, when I was there, I got one of these. If you see it, this is a T-shirt from when I was in Israel with my wife.
When was that?
That was in 1977 in November. And Menachem Begin was always an image that I admired, because when I was in the Young Leadership Cabinet, I was sent the book, The Revolt, which I read. So as a result of that, I was convinced that this was a good thing, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved. When I was asked to be one of the producers, I said, let me think about it. And I questioned my granddaughter, who's 16 years old, about who Menachem Begin was. And she said to me, wasn't he a prime minister or something in Israel and a terrorist? And then I questioned some other teenagers, and I said, it's very important to be involved in this mission to promote what a man who made all of his decisions based on what is right, as opposed to what's good for him and what would enrich him. It was what would enrich the Jewish people, the state of Israel, and humanity in general.
So before we get on to the next question, Jonathan, this is online. It says, Upheaval is a film that sheds light on discrimination in the political and social arena, the Holocaust, and Israel's will to prevail against anti-Semitism. Gruber revisits Begin's resilience towards anti-Semitism in the film. If Jews didn't stand up for Jews, then who would? So we're standing up for the cause and for people. So, Jonathan, tell us, why did you feel it was important to make this film? And what was your connection, either in the beginning or during or at the end of this, that was personal to you?
Sure. Well, I should, the visionary for this film is Rob Schwartz. He's the executive producer, and he was the one who came to me and said, would you be a part of directing this? Rob had read a book about Menachem Begin called The Prime Ministers by Yehuda Avner, and was enamored with Begin, and realized that there was no English feature documentary ever done on Menachem Begin, which is pretty remarkable considering what an iconic person he is. So for me, what was really important, as I said, was to convey his leadership. But over the course of the making of the film, it became more clear to me, unfortunately, that anti-Semitism is on the rise. And specifically, in Hanukkah of 2019, there were, I think, 9 different attacks in the New York area over that Hanukkah weekend. And it made me realize that what we need to fight for is what Menachem Begin has been fighting for, which is against anti-Semitism, to stand up to it, to say it's not okay. Wherever it happens, it happened in his life, starting when he was a young child in Poland, to living through the Holocaust, through his incarceration in the Gulag in the Soviet Union, to fighting in Israel, against whether it was the Brits or the Arabs. And anti-Semitism is something, unfortunately, that has not gone away. Personally, all of my grandparents are Holocaust survivors, so it touches me very closely, these messages that Menachem Begin and the ideals that he embodied.
And thank you for that. And Barry, you mentioned about your young daughter when she was trying to figure out who this was, and the history of Israel and the history of humankind. All right. So at that moment when she said that, what went on in your head as far as what do I need to do so that what occurs?
I think at that point, I committed myself to work on assisting with the film in the promotion and the development, especially a portion that could be presented to schools. And that's being worked on at this point. And I think the film will educate people on the proper conduct that we should be doing in the future. As Jonathan said, Menachem Begin, he was raised in Brisk, where he had to run away from the Holocaust. He went to Soviet Union, where he was put into jail. And from there...
Siberia, if I remember right.
Siberia, yeah. And from there, he went to Israel and fought. But every time he did things, when he was with the Irgun, he did them in what I call a menschlichkeit manner, which means an individual, a proper method of conducting, a moral responsibility. And that's basically what he showed throughout his life, in how he respected his wife and everybody around him.
So along that line, Jonathan, the website for the film, and by the way, what's the address for the website? It's
upheavalfilm.com. And there you see upheaval, so you see how to spell it. Not everybody gets it right.
In researching it, I just put an upheaval, man. It's you guys are everywhere. So my congratulations to you. And if I remember, this is everywhere plus. All right. So the website says, imprisoned by the Soviets, orphaned by the Holocaust, elected prime minister, crowned peacemaker by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, haunted by the Lebanon War, Menachem Begin was a pillar for the state of Israel, an tireless effort for the creation of it. All right. And so, Jonathan, what surprised you a lot about Begin that you didn't know when you first started?
That's a great question, Michael. I think the thing that stands out for me, we talk about all of these powerful, things that Menachem Begin represented, but I think it's the relationship with his wife that really, really struck me. And for people who haven't seen the film yet, hopefully you'll be able to. And it starts today, actually, the Miami Jewish Film Festival, and people in Florida will be able to see it at no cost. So hopefully you'll be able to see it. But he and his wife went through so much together, and that when it came time for him to accept awards, or even the night of his election, the first thing that he says, been in the opposition for almost 30 years. The first thing he says is, I want to thank my wife. And he quotes from Jeremiah about how they've been through the wilderness, through a land littered with mines. It's just beautiful and poetic. And he was able to do the things he was able to do because he had the support of his wife, and he honored that throughout his life.
It's pretty amazing. We always joked about it, but it's really not, there's not a woman behind successful men. They're there, not just beside them, sometimes in front of them, whether you see the footprints or not. They're always there, encouraging, whether it's subconsciously or right out front. So after this film, and this film is showing, what lessons and what things do you want younger people to take from the film, and so that they can share that with their friends and with their families and with their parents who haven't been back to it yet, and that they can carry that on?
Well, one of the things that I think is very important is the way Menachem Begin conducted himself when he was with the Irgun. Everybody called him a terrorist when they bombed the King David Hotel, but actually it wasn't a hotel at the time. It was where the British used as offices for the military. But prior to that, he called and told them he was going to do it. So basically, no one would die. Unfortunately, the British didn't believe him. And I believe a number of people was, Jonathan, you can correct me, I think it was 90 people died from that. And that's why he was called a terrorist. In addition to that, there was a ship, the Atalena, and that ship was bringing arms in. And between the Irgun and Ben Gurion's group and so forth, they couldn't come to terms with who gets the arms. And there was an attack on the ship. And Begin wouldn't allow the men from the Irgun on the ship to shoot other Jews. They just jumped ship. And that showed the character of a man. And the other thing that impressed me, and I'd like all of the youth to understand, today when you look at a politician, he leaves office, he's a multimillionaire, he writes a book, he does all kinds of things to make money. And when Menachem Begin left, he lived in a small apartment with his wife. And before that, same apartment that he lived in before. And he didn't do it to enrich himself. He did it to enrich the Jewish people.
And if I could, no, just to jump in, is that he left office, he actually resigned. I mean, I think that's also a legacy, unfortunately, not a fantastic legacy in that regard because of the difficulties of the Lebanon War, but he did it because he felt that he wasn't able to lead the people anymore. Again, speaks to his integrity. When in 1948, when there was a massacre at the Arab village of Deir Yassin under the command of the Irgun, Menachem Begin took responsibility for that. He said it was a terrible accident. It shouldn't have happened. Menachem Begin throughout his life has been or fought for people, and when things didn't go right, he took responsibility for them. He, the Sephardic Jews who were in Israel and the Middle East, from the Middle East and North Africa, were discriminated against terribly in Israel by the European sort of more elite, the people, the leaders of the country. And Menachem Begin said this is unacceptable. And that's, that gave him his political power, was this base of people who felt like they had been forgotten. And those are the people ultimately that elected him.
I think also Menachem Begin looked at all people as important. With the Vietnamese people he allowed into Israel, and then when he brought the Ethiopian Jews in and he flew them in, to me it was just unbelievable, because I was in there when the plane landed and the Ethiopians were coming in, to see these people. And today they're integrated into society, they're in the military and everything else.
And you gentlemen bring up an interesting point, is on one hand, when you look at people that may have been considered Israel's enemies, but yet they can be treated in the hospitals, all right? And which is really so significant, all right? When my wife was first telling me about this years ago, I was stunned. But then Menachem Begin obviously had something to do with that, to make us equal as humans, right? And we know that Israel has really changed the world. This little tiny part of the globe, and so many important people and so many inventions have been there. But if we could get back to Menachem Begin, how did the way he conducted his life really affect not just Israel, but everywhere else?
Well, one thing I think that's really important to acknowledge is also in the beginning of the state, when he was in the opposition, he advocated for for the rights of Israeli Arabs who were at that time living under military rule, Israeli military rule. And he said, listen, these are citizens of this country, and they deserve to be treated the way that other citizens of this country are. So in terms of what he taught us to the world, I mean, he was the person who made peace with Egypt. As you know, Barry, I love that T-shirt. Does it still fit?
So when you researched this, which you did for a long time, did it seem as though saying and doing those things was difficult for him, and or it was just sort of a natural thing for him?
Someone asked me a great question at one of our film festivals. They said, what was Menachem Begin in public versus Menachem Begin in private? And to me, it was clear that they were one and the same, that his experiences in the Holocaust, his experiences of anti-Semitism made him a true fighter for the Jewish people. And that when he said, you know, we're not going to let another Holocaust happen again, he meant it. And he meant that to the point that he bombed the Osirak nuclear reactor. And then when people said, oh, you can't do that, you know, it's another country, he said, we have nothing to apologize for. And then, of course, you know, Saddam Hussein was the one who was going to have a nuclear bomb. People recognize now, oh, yeah, that's a good thing that they did that.
And I did want to repeat, just for the people that might be listening that miss it, if Jews didn't stand up for Jews, then who would? And so we look at this Menachem Begin and the changes in the globe that he created, and what you're saying, it was just natural for him to do that. Why do you think it was so natural for him to stand up for people?
Well, he was a refugee. He was on the run, and he understood what it was like to not have to be rootless. And so when the Vietnamese, as Barry mentioned, when the Vietnamese boat people were trapped in the South China Sea and nobody would accept them into their country, Menachem Begin said, we will take you. We know what it's like. He said in the film, it's a great quote. He says, we'll take you just like our old father Abraham did. And Good. So he understood, you know, what it was like to have needs and to meet those needs. Now he also created issues. I mean, this is not a perfect man, and I think that's really important to recognize, is that our film talks about the nuances of his life and the complexities of his life and the decisions that sometimes didn't go right. One of the most controversial things that he did was expand the settlements in the West Bank. The Labor Party, the on the other side, started that after the 1967 war, after they conquered those lands. But Menachem Begin expanded these dramatically, and today that's the legacy of something that started with Menachem Begin, and you know, people feel strongly about it on both sides.
And thank you, Barry. You went to Israel, obviously, many years ago. All right. So why don't you talk about that for a moment, and things that you also learned about, and we spoke before about security and how that impacted your life after that visit.
Yeah, right after Munich, where the athletes were killed, I got involved with a gentleman who encouraged me to go to Israel, and I was trained in security. And I actually maintained my expertise, if you call it, for many years. And I went to various training in military institutes in Israel. But interestingly enough, one of the people who was a bomb expert and trainer was with Menachem Begin when he went to Sadat's funeral. I don't know if I told Jonathan about this, but I just remembered it right now. And he was explaining to me that Sadat's funeral was on Shabbat, the Sabbath, Saturday. And Begin refused to ride to the funeral. He walked. And this gentleman, who was my friend and trainer, was next to Menachem Begin. And it got to the point where he was worn out. So they were sort of carrying him. And they didn't want it to look like that. So they only allowed the pictures to be from his waist up while his feet were not on the ground.
Perfect.
So that's an interesting thing. Another friend of mine who did things with Israel security, he spent 3 weeks in Egypt prior to Sadat coming to Israel, to Jerusalem. And I think what it epitomizes Israel and the changes that I've seen from the early 70s to today is that Israel is a place where everyone can live, everyone can pray, they can go to church, to synagogue, to a mosque. There aren't many other countries besides the United States in the free world that do that. And when you look at currently any of the Arab states, there's very few Jews able to pray. But because of Begin's upbringing and the fact that Rabbi Soloveitchik's family there had such a great influence, he was an extremely intelligent, knowledgeable gentleman.
Thank you for that. And Jonathan Gruber, tell us some of the things that you really enjoyed doing as far as researching for the film, and how you got all these clips to put this together, and who you brought in so you could make this happen.
Sure. Well, it's now coming up on about 2 years since I started on the project, and one of the harder things was actually being ruthless about it. There was so much material that we had that on the one hand we had a tremendous amount of it, but on the other hand we wanted to find things that people hadn't seen before, and so we were able to do both. And so with tremendous researchers, one of our producers who did research, Rachel Greenberg, she went to the Carter Center, she went to the Reagan Presidential Library, she went to Tennessee at Vanderbilt, where they have all these old news reports, and we were able to find these just tremendous little bits of Menachem Begin. I mean, it's really about Begin. The film is Begin in his own words, and you get a sense of his intelligence, his candor, his humor also. But I think the thing that probably stands out for me the most is at the very end of the film. After he resigned, he basically went into isolation for 9 years until his death. No one saw him, and then at some point he came out. And there's this one little clip that we have at the end that had even our researchers in Israel hadn't seen. And I had read about it, that there was something that he had done, some interview. And so we were able to unearth that. And that's at the end. It's a very poignant scene. And so we have all sorts of things from the beginning to the end, things that we didn't include. When Meet the Press, before it was even a television show, Menachem Begin in the 40s is on the Meet the Press radio show talking about his opinions about the Jews in the state of Israel. So just remarkable things that we were able to come across.
And Barry, if you had to guess, how many people were involved in any way in the production, in the research, in this whole process? Give our viewers an idea of how many people.
I think Jonathan would know better than I. But just from the overall background, even prior to Jonathan getting involved in the actual making of the film, but the preparation to make the film, and I'll just take a guess, I would say well over 200 to 300 people.
Jonathan,
that sounds about right.
And it takes a lot of devotion that's driven for a lot of reasons. This isn't like just some little project you want to go do about fishing in the Everglades. This is a significant event, putting all this together so that this generation and next ones and the ones that missed out will have an opportunity to see the film. If somebody wants to see the film, what do they need to do?
Well, if they're in Florida, then they have the opportunity for the next 2 weeks to watch the film for free. They just have to go to MiamiJewishFilmFestival.org, and then they will be regaled for 87 minutes with the story of Menachem Begin's life, and about 3 minutes or so of credits at the end, which goes to show you how many people were involved, including, I mean, without Barry, we could not have gotten to this point. I mean, he does so much work behind the scenes to help us keep this on track. We're grateful to Barry. After that, it will be the world premiere of the film is going to be on June 7th. Currently, we're planning to do a virtual rollout with it, and there'll be more news and publicity about it. But that is the 40th anniversary of the bombing of the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. And then on June 9th, it'll be available, the virtual cinema release. People can buy tickets and watch it just like you would normally, except it'll be on your screen as opposed to theaters. And then it'll be widely available starting in June.
That's terrific. And, the credits at the end, so often we want to see them at the beginning or somewhere, in between, because so many people spend a lot of time, all right? a lot of time in creating this and being involved with this. And I want to thank everybody that was even touched it, even thought about it. The initial call that you received a while back, all right? So I think that was great. And so, Barry, let's just talk for a moment, and we have about 5 minutes left, about what this means to you.
I think this means that we have developed as a group something that will last for many, many years in the future. It will be teaching a lesson of how you should conduct yourself to hopefully all people, not just Jews, to see that what is right and what is wrong is wrong.
That's tremendous. And Jonathan, the same to you. What did you get out of this whole process?
Well, I learned more about Israel. I'm grateful that the projects that I've done have taken me to Israel, and I've learned more of the complexities of the country. And it's not this sort of Israel's great or Israel is horrible. It's a country like any other. And I have family that lives there. My mom, my grandmother, aunts and uncles. I have probably 2/3 of my family that lives there. And so I get to understand it and see it through their eyes. I'm an American telling an Israeli story. And so I'm grateful that people in Israel have opened up their hearts, and told their stories to us and helped us share about one of their remarkable leaders to the rest of the world.
And that's wonderful. We would like to end with each of you speaking for a moment about speaking to a young person about their future. It can be about the film. It can be about whatever you like. Somebody that's been watching this, they're looking to you, gentlemen, and looking down the road as we get out of this pandemic, and they're looking towards their life. So why don't you look right in that camera, Barry, right there, and speak for 60 seconds or so about their futures.
Well, I think we have a tremendous future ahead of us. The pandemic will pass, and as long as the new generations will continue to learn and understand from history, we can't erase history. History is there. And Menachem Begin was a man who accepted that. And when he made a mistake, or he thought he made a mistake, he apologized. He accepted responsibility, as Jonathan told us. And accepting responsibility, correcting things that you've done, everybody goes wrong. And if the youth would understand that and learn to listen to other people's views and understand them before you condemn them.
Thank you very much. And Jonathan, there's some young people that are looking at you and say, what he is doing is wonderful, all right? And I'd like you to talk to some young people and talk to them again about their future. It can be about the film or things that you learned, or about your life and their futures.
Sure. That was beautiful, Barry. Thank you. I would just say, number one, we're going to get out of this really soon. Whether you're students of history or not, you can remember this will be the second version of the Roaring '20s once we get out of it. So hang in there, and we'll be there. I think what's really important is to look. We've had a lot of opportunity for introspection, a lot of time to be by ourselves, and that you should think about your story and what your story is for the world, and how you can share that story in a kind way, in an understanding way, as Barry said, and to recognize that the past is just a guidepost for you, that you're writing the future. It's a blank canvas for you. You can do whatever you want, but don't ignore, sort of the mistakes of the past, but also learn from the past. And we've done tremendous things, and we'll continue to do tremendous things in the future. So hang in there, and it's going to be all right. And thanks for watching.
My pleasure. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think Jonathan has said it, and I thank that I had the opportunity to meet Jonathan and work with such wonderful people.
And
Thanks,
Jonathan,
Barry,
okay, we're getting ready to sign out here. Jonathan, anything else you'd like to add?
Just stay safe, everybody. We're in the home stretch, hopefully.
Okay, and I want to thank Barry Gurland, the producer of Upheaval, and thank you for sharing your story. And Jonathan Gruber, thank you for sharing your story and the story of Menachem Begin and Upheaval, the journey of Menachem Begin. Again,
thank you, Michael.
My pleasure, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us again. This is Live with Miami's Community News. Tommy, thank you for producing the show, and we'll see you later. Have a great time.